In this video, I'm going to talk about how hiding my sexuality when I was younger resulted in addiction and self-harm later in life. Now, I know this sounds really extreme, but remember, you don't have to be on crack to be an addict or be cutting your wrist to be a self-harmer. There are so many forms and variations of these harmful coping strategies, and you'd be surprised how easily some people hide them. They're not always obvious. And some people pretend like they're not a problem until they are. For example, one experience of addiction and self-harm that I had personally came in the form of an eating disorder that manifested over the course of 20 years until I finally got help. So how did that all come about? Well, I'm going to tell you a bit more about my story to explain, and perhaps there are elements of it that you can relate to, because I know that my story is not unique. Like most gay men, I experienced and avoided shame throughout a large part of my life. I realised I was gay from about the age of 4. I hid my sexuality because fundamentally, I believed that a core part of my being was flawed. This was despite me having a very liberal family and very loving parents. As I explained in a previous video, I believe that it was social conditioning that created those beliefs, with the media, specific commentary and bullying reaffirming them. Hiding a core aspect of who I was and living in fear that someone may discover my secret naturally caused a lot of internalized stress for me. And so I turned to my first coping mechanism when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and that was food. Binge eating distracted my mind. It gave me the control that I lacked over my own sexuality. I also did it in private, which just added to the guilt and the shame. I managed to keep it secret until I started becoming overweight. And based on appearances, I think I was just considered a bit of a greedy growing boy. But it later led to further bullying and lower self-esteem. The secretive binge eating lasted well into my teens, by which point I'd also discovered weed and alcohol, and I was smoking and drinking a fair bit actually from the age of 13. Looking back, there was clearly a compulsion to numb whatever was going on in my head, but it was by whatever means were at my disposal. Anyway, the weight kept creeping up, and this was despite me playing rugby every single day, by the way. Bit of a sideline story. I come from a big rugby family, and I was enrolled to play rugby to see if it would help with shifting the weight, but also help with the bullying. I think my parents just wanted me to make some friends, and in some ways it really did help. I was actually quite good at it, and I ended up playing rugby for school, club and county. I can't fault the good intentions of my parents, actually. They were certainly just being protective, but what played out in my head was something very different. As you can perhaps appreciate, putting a young boy who's coming to terms with his homosexuality in a raw heterosexual environment certainly didn't help coax me out the closet. If anything, it forced me further back into it. And with the self-denial, self-hatred and shame came more binging and more weight gain. I didn't realise it then, but my obsession with food and the way I looked had already formed the foundations of addictive behaviours that were going to cause me both mental health and physical health challenges for many years to come. And that same guilt and shame that I felt regarding my sexuality, it was just resurfacing under a new guise. It's easy to look back now and see that I really had nothing to be ashamed of. This addiction that I had, this illness, it was destroying my body, but it wasn't my fault. And it certainly didn't feel that way though at the time. I just kept telling myself I'll deal with it tomorrow, I'll deal with it tomorrow. The stigma of it, the perception that it made me weak, and the perception that it made me flawed, it was enough to stop me from telling anyone, from doing what I knew I needed to do, which was get help. Tomorrow finally came for me when I just couldn't take the negative thoughts anymore, and my digestive problems were just impossible to ignore. I'd lived with this addiction and illness for over 10 years, and now it was eating me up inside. I finally decided to go to my GP, and I'm so glad I did. If anyone out there is going through this or has been through something similar, these are intended as words of hope and reassurance. To anyone out there telling themselves that they'll deal with it tomorrow, please don't wait until tomorrow. Do it today. It really does get better, but that first and most important step is asking for help. Thank you.